Yeah, I'm Marcus Roberts. I'm Director of Policy and Membership at Drugscope. I think the obvious things that it's easy to miss. It's good that we've still got a strong commitment to rehabilitation on the agenda, and I think there is a recognition of the importance of things like housing, employment, relationships for that agenda. I think another very obvious thing, but it's positive that we're looking at reducing offending outcomes and being serious about ensuring the services we provide are effective for that. I guess the third thing is that at least potentially the way Transforming Rehabilitation has been set up does provide some new opportunities for independent providers, including the voluntary sector, although we've got some significant concerns about that, which I'm sure we'll come on to in a bit. Equally, I think there's been a lot of emphasis on the role of service users, the potential role of peer mentoring and peer support. Again, I think that could be a very positive development, but again, I think there's also some real issues about how that's delivered in practice. Well, I guess the first two are in a way flip sides of some of those advantages. The decision to run a payment by results model that looks very like the work programme that's nationally commissioned in big contract package areas does at least raise some questions about the ability of the voluntary and community sector, particularly smaller voluntary and community sector organisations, to get involved and to be involved in providing services often where they've got really good experience and really good track records of delivery. And we know there's a lot of thinking about how that will work, and market stewardship and supply chain management. And there's some learning from the work programme, but the experience of the work programme suggests potentially there will be issues and problems and grounds for concern there. I think the other thing is with the peer mentoring, which, as I say, I think is positive. In the drug and alcohol sector, there's been quite an interesting debate about the role of recovery champions, service users who work with other service users to support their recovery. Positive about the idea of that role, but recovery champions need to be themselves very carefully supported. It's important, for example, in peer mentoring that you're matching people with peers they're going to be able to work with and are genuine peers for them. A good example for that, and I think how this works for women is one of the questions in there, is we recently did a report called Challenge for Change, on women with substance misuse problems involved in prostitution, and for them, which would include some people coming out of prisons, if they're going to be effectively peer mentored, it needs to be with other women who have a shared set of experiences. I guess the other key ones are, firstly, really welcome the fact that there's a focus on better support for short-term prisoners on release. We, like a lot of other people, have been campaigning for that for a long time. But the flip side of that is the risk that short sentences become more attractive for sentencers, and generally we would argue, particularly for people with serious drug and alcohol problems, who often are prolific offenders but commit relatively low-level non-violent offending, that the ideal is to look to community sentences. I think it's very seldom the case that sentencing someone for that sort of offence to a few weeks or a few months in prison is helpful. It disrupts recovery capital and creates additional problems in them sorting themselves out and getting their lives on track. Well, we've talked about peer mentoring, and I think that presents both an opportunity and a risk. I think significant opportunities for peer mentors and service users to get involved in supporting other people in their rehabilitation, but also real risks if the peer mentors are not carefully supported themselves. I think the other thing which comes out is that the extended licensing and supervision periods both potentially can have benefits for service users if they're supportive, but also I think significant increased risk that you'll get people who are potentially you could be sentenced to a couple of weeks imprisonment, but effectively the sentence ends up lasting, effectively 52, 53 weeks once you add on the licence and supervision periods. Significant risks there of breach, and people actually finding themselves embroiled in the criminal justice process for longer than they currently are, including potentially return to prison. Two examples for our sector of that. On the one hand, that now prisoners on licence under the, presuming the offender rehabilitation bill has passed as it currently is, will be subject to drug testing for Class B drugs, including cannabis, and there's significant issues about the level of breach you might get through that route. And the other thing is the introduction, again by the bill that Parliament are looking at the moment, of a drug treatment attendance requirement, which effectively will require people to attend a series of appointments with a drug treatment service. And again, opportunities there to engage people with services, but also risks of breach. I mean, I think on the one hand, I think there is a genuine willingness at the Ministry of Justice to look at some of the lessons from the work programme, and perhaps, although we're not clear on the details at the moment, some of the discussion about, for example, grant funding, Tier 3 organisations, feels like there's some kind of will to respond to that issue, although we are yet very short on details about how that will work. I mean, I have two key thoughts on that, I think. I mean, one is just about money. I mean, the Ministry of Justice itself is managing very significant cuts to its own budget, and I've heard the Secretary of State saying that while he's supportive of smaller organisations, he's also very keen that he gets bang for his buck, and has to be very careful that he's investing in services that can demonstrate good outcomes. I mean, the challenge for smaller voluntary sector organisations is often they achieve wonderful outcomes but don't have the same capacity and resources to demonstrate that and build that evidence base. So there's an anxiety there. I mean, the other one for me is the sheer complexity of the emerging commissioning environment. Drug and alcohol services are one example. It's not just transforming rehabilitation. We've got a whole raft of new novel commissioning structures, where there are much more local authority responsibility for commissioning drug and alcohol services, police and crime commissioners at police authority level, the work programme working in contract package, transforming rehabilitation. It's not just how does transforming rehabilitation work for smaller organisations, and there's key questions there, but how does that whole package of reforms, where does it leave both the voluntary sector generally and smaller organisations specifically, particularly when you factor in the constraints due to very substantial and ongoing cuts in budgets for both national and local government. Is that all right?
Yeah, yeah, no.